Kimi Antonelli let Lando Norris through in Qatar, and the internet went ballistic. Within minutes, Red Bull's senior staff were accusing him of manipulating the race. What followed? Death threats, leaked radio messages, and a full-blown FIA investigation. Subscribe now, because Red Bull has just issued a rare public apology, and what they revealed changes everything. The final laps of the 2025 Qatar Grand Prix should have been routine. Red Bull had locked in another win with Verstappen. McLaren was closing in on a double podium. But when Kimi Antonelli, the 18-year-old Mercedes Jr., was heard lifting off to let Lando Norris pass without a fight, everything exploded. It was a move that looked clean, strategic even, but what came after was anything but. Radio messages from inside the Mercedes garage confirmed the decision had been made after analyzing tire delta and championship implications. Antonelli's pace was fading, and letting Norris go was the most logical call for Mercedes' long-term constructors' battle. But the optics? A Mercedes driver helping a McLaren in the closing laps of a title-deciding race? That was fuel for controversy, and Red Bull lit the match instantly. Helmut Marko, Red Bull's top advisor, went on Austrian television within the hour, calling Antonelli's move highly suspicious, and accusing Mercedes of influencing the championship off-track. Those words didn't stay in Europe. Within minutes, Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit were flooded with conspiracy theories. Some fans even claimed the move was premeditated, pointing to past karting connections between Norris and Antonelli. Others went further, suggesting a hidden alliance to stop Red Bull's title dominance. But what truly changed everything was the harassment that followed. By midnight, Antonelli's social accounts were shut down after receiving hundreds of violent messages. Several included direct death threats. Others mocked his age, his nationality, and accused him of ruining the sport forever. Italian media tried to shield the rising star, but the damage was global. F1's youngest talent had become the latest victim of online rage, and the sport stayed silent for far too long. It wasn't until 3 days later that Red Bull issued an official apology. A brief, carefully worded statement acknowledged that comments made in the heat of competition may have contributed to an environment of online hostility. But inside the paddock, many saw it as damage control. FIA officials, pressured by teams and sponsors, had already launched a formal review into how senior F1 figures' comments can fuel fan aggression, with Antonelli's case as the first real test of enforcement. What makes this incident different is the evidence that surfaced afterward. Screenshots of Antonelli's post-race data showed zero abnormal brake traces. Team radio confirmed he was told, "Don't hold Norris up, we need the time gap." Even telemetry comparisons proved he didn't intentionally slow more than his degraded tire performance predicted. In other words, there was no foul play, just a kid following orders in the most high-pressure moment of his life. And yet, his name remains dragged through the mud. For a generation of F1 fans, Antonelli was supposed to be the next Italian hero. But now, before his rookie season is even over, he's been accused, insulted, and left without public defense for days. The scandal may fade from headlines, but the impact on Antonelli and the precedent it sets could linger far longer. This wasn't just an overreaction. It was a warning shot for every young driver entering the sport in the social media age. Once the FIA began its post-race review, the first thing on the table was the telemetry. Every turn, throttle lift, and brake trace from Antonelli's final 5 laps in Qatar was pulled into a high-resolution timeline. What they found was simple and unequivocal: no irregularities, no sudden throttle dumps, no fake lockups. Antonelli didn't sabotage anything, he simply followed a strategic call made by Mercedes to minimize time loss and avoid unnecessary tire wear during a hopeless defense. Engineers compared Antonelli's delta time before and after Norris overtook him. The gap grew steadily, not suddenly. That's a crucial detail. In race manipulation cases, you often see sharp deltas when a driver intentionally lifts early or brakes earlier than needed. Antonelli's driving, however, showed a natural degradation curve, consistent with a soft compound that had reached its performance window's lower limit. It wasn't sabotage, it was physics. Another layer of proof came from the team radio. In the now public exchange, Antonelli's race engineer said, quote, "Kimi, we're going to let Lando go. We need clean air for tire cooling. Don't waste time here." That instruction wasn't about favoring McLaren. It was about protecting Mercedes' own race strategy. Their goal was to keep Antonelli in a points-paying position without damaging the car or inviting a 3-lap defensive fight he couldn't win. Red Bull's initial narrative, pushed publicly by Helmut Marko and indirectly echoed by certain media outlets, relied heavily on the idea that Antonelli had gifted a position. But when you look at the GPS overlays, Norris was already gaining nearly half a second per sector in the middle stint. Even without yielding, the overtake was inevitable and would likely have cost both drivers more time if contested aggressively. Furthermore, Mercedes' internal briefing before the race already had Antonelli slotted as the team's second priority for strategic calls. George Russell was fighting for podiums, Antonelli was there to support data collection and tire offset strategy. That meant his role in Qatar was clear: don't interfere with the front runners, and collect clean telemetry for the final rounds. That context was either ignored or deliberately omitted in the early backlash. Telemetry also showed that Antonelli activated lift and coast sequences in high-temperature zones, particularly turns 11 through 14. That was a cooling strategy, not a manipulation ploy. With ambient track temperatures still hovering above 45 degrees Celsius in Qatar's closing laps, the team prioritized car health. No one, not Antonelli, not even Norris, benefited unfairly. Mercedes simply managed their race cleanly, conservatively, and within regulation. All of this data was presented to the FIA, the media, and even to Red Bull's own compliance office after the race. In the face of such undeniable technical clarity, the only response possible was a correction. Red Bull's apology may have been late, but it came because the evidence was overwhelming. The numbers didn't lie. Antonelli did exactly what his team asked him to do. And he did it without error, without hesitation, and without even knowing the storm that would come next. Mercedes entered the Qatar Grand Prix weekend with a conservative objective for Kimi Antonelli. He was not there to fight for podiums or hold position against faster cars like the McLarens or Red Bulls. His primary job, according to internal strategy documents, was to complete a clean, data-rich race with consistent tire usage and avoid unnecessary track battles. That meant lifting in certain sectors, executing lift and coast protocols, and allowing faster cars through if it protected the larger team strategy. From lap 1, Antonelli followed that directive. He maintained a safe gap to Fernando Alonso and kept his own tire temperatures under control in a field where degradation was already a known factor. Mercedes had calculated that their car, in clean air and running a slightly extended first stint, could offset the late race drop-off that plagued rivals in previous rounds. Antonelli was the experimental leg of that approach, and until the Norris incident, it was working exactly as planned. By lap 38, his soft tires were reaching their thermal cliff. At that point, Mercedes told him to avoid battling Lando Norris, who was on a different tire compound and several tenths faster per lap. From a race engineering perspective, fighting Norris made no sense. It would have compromised Antonelli's remaining pace and cost Mercedes valuable strategic data that could help Russell in the final races of the season. What Antonelli did wasn't giving up, it was intelligent prioritization. Simulations before the race had already shown that a fight with Norris would have likely dropped Antonelli into DRS range of 2 other cars behind him, meaning he'd risk losing multiple positions, not just one. The team's modeling used a risk-reward calculation based on tire life, energy deployment, and traffic management. When that model was updated mid-race with live degradation data, the optimal strategy was clear: yield the position, protect the stint, and stay within a clean data window. This was especially important for Mercedes as they're developing their 2026 power unit with track-specific degradation models. Antonelli's race was not only a real-time competition, it was also a rolling research platform. Every lift, every corner exit, every brake temperature he maintained fed back into their simulator development. In short, he wasn't just racing, he was contributing to the next generation of Mercedes design direction. What shocked the Mercedes garage was not the fan reaction, but the lack of understanding from rival teams. Red Bull knew the value of running a secondary driver on a test strategy. They'd done it with Albon and Gasly in previous years. Yet somehow, the choice to apply it to Antonelli was framed as favoritism or manipulation. That double standard, some within the team admitted privately, was deeply frustrating, especially for a rookie being thrown into such a high-pressure narrative. Despite the noise, the reality is this: Antonelli executed the race plan to perfection. He didn't miss breakpoints, didn't compromise entry speed, and gave up a single position to prevent a larger strategic collapse. That's what Mercedes asked of him. And now, ironically, the public backlash he received may turn him into a more composed, mentally stronger driver heading into 2026. What was meant to be a data-focused learning race became a political firestorm, but in the end, his performance held up under the microscope.